We're here for the launch of a very special book by a very special person. Please come on stage, Firoz.
Thank you.
Round of applause for him.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also, the author of Why Don't You Write Something I Might Read, which resonated with me as a book lover, and probably the best person to be in conversation with Firoz, who's written a book about books. Please welcome Mr. Suresh Menon. The last person I'd like to call on stage is our beloved bookman of Bangalore, Krishna, please. And I would love for three of you to please release the book.
This is my favorite place with my favorite people, doing the favorite thing of my life, talking about books.
So it is an honor. It's great fun. It's a delightfully produced book. I'm amazed that Indian publishers are capable of bringing out such a brilliantly produced book. It's a lot of fun, but it's also a lot of hard work. One can see that. And just to add to what has been said about Firoz and what we're going to be talking about, I'll just read to you a short paragraph which puts all these things that we're talking about and going to talk about in perspective.
I'm getting scared. I'm like, I have C.K. Meena who helped me kind of become a better writer, and she always tells me how mediocre I am in my writing. So I'm very scared. It's like when you write your English essay and send it to your school teacher, and she kind of underlines with red pen. That's the feeling I get. I hope you're picking up a good part of what I wrote, or somebody else wrote about me. Doesn't matter.
No, the much as I would like to pick out a paragraph and criticize it, the fact is that I'm picking out a para which is at the end of the book, the afterword by Pradeep Sebastian, whom many of you know. I just want to read the first para of this. And since I was in school many years ago, I'll have to take off my glasses. One day, while I was at the Bookworm, a second-hand bookshop in Bangalore, Krishna, the owner, took out from a locked cupboard a copy of the limited editions club's Lysistrata with Picasso's signature in pencil at the colophon. I had hardly expected to come across something as fine as this in a bookshop in India and congratulated him. Actually, it's not for sale. This has been loaned to the bookshop by the collector V.R. Firoz, he replied. Really, but why? I couldn't help exclaiming. Because he feels it will just sit on his shelf, whereas here browsers can enjoy looking at it. Not only this book, but Firoz sir has given us other rare books also from his collection, such as the recent limited edition signed by Harper Lee. What collector would, after having spent $1 lakh or so on a single book, gladly proceed to remove it from his shelf and place it in the custody of another to display? Now, in that short paragraph, you know everything there is to know about Firoz. Because not only is he a book lover and a book collector, he's also a lover of book lovers. And if it means that you can walk into a place like this and look at a rare book, look at probably a first folio, maybe that's going to happen someday. It would make him as happy as it would make the person reading the book or looking at it. Because unfortunately in India, we do not have the classic antiquarian bookstore like you've always had in New York, for example. The Select Bookshop, which prides itself on being 18 miles of books, they have a separate section for these books, for the antiquarian books. You will find books signed by authors of 17th century, 18th century. You'll also find books signed by, I think, even someone like Ian Fleming. A book signed by Ian Fleming costs the earth. And I just want to make a couple of quick observations. There's a lovely book that both of us are extremely fond of. It's by Nicholas Basbane called A Gentle Madness, and it is about collecting books. Basbanes later became a good friend of Firoz's, and in fact he has written a preface to this book. He says, he quotes somebody, it's not, he didn't say this, somebody says this, he quotes him, he says, the bibliophile is the master of his books, the bibliomaniac their slave. And I like that distinction. I like that distinction about somebody who loves books and somebody who just, collects books because he thinks it's a very stylish and sexy thing to do. So my first question, the obvious one, Feroz, who is a bibliophile, let me very quickly clarify, is how did you get into the emotion of collecting books? Forget the physical part of it. How did you get into the emotion of collecting books?
So I grew up in a middle class family where one of the key messages my father told me specifically is that the wealth of a house is measured by the books in the house, not by the money in the bank. Right? And if you are a middle class family, you know that the best way to make money is through education. So we spent money on books and nothing else. And being from a lower middle class family, we didn't have too much, but we spent money on books. And I was surrounded by books, and mostly it was Reader's Digest. So reading books meant Reader's Digest once a month, or you go to the railway officer's library. I fell in love with books only after coming to Bangalore, and I think every person in Bangalore would say there's a Shanbagh story, and of course I have my multiple Shanbagh stories. But really the first time I actually got a signed book was from Shashi Tharoor. He had come to Bangalore for a book event, and as I don't know whether it's coincidence or it's intentionality, but 2 days before the book went on print, Shashi Tharoor gave me a beautiful blurb. So my journey with books and signed books started with Shashi Tharoor. He had written a very beautiful book called The Riot, which is not necessarily his most famous book. Riot was about a Hindu girl falling in love with a Muslim boy, and how that created riots across the country. Exactly what I was going through at that phase in my life. My wife is a Hindu Brahmin, I am a Muslim, and it took my parents 10 years to agree to us getting married. And the fact is my father-in-law told that there will be riots when you get married. And I was like, shit man, am I that important? I mean, there will be riots in the country because some stupid guy, Feroz, is getting married to some Dipali who nobody cares about. So the book spoke to me. As I said, it need not be Shashi Tharoor's greatest book, but it spoke to me. And to get a copy of the favorite book signed by Shashi Tharoor, I said, there is something that when you personalize it, there's something that the book carries that connects you to somebody else, and there's a story with that. And that's how I started actually collecting author signed books. And remember, this was the pre-Amazon era. So if you wanted an author signed book, you actually have to go to a book event like this. And I used to literally, look out for where is the next author book launch. And, Strand used to have some book events. Oxford used to have a few book events. And I used to wait for a book launch event and collect it. And so the reason was every time I had a signed book, there was a story. And people ask me, Feroz, what the hell do you do? Do you write? Do you teach? You work for SAP? I say, I'm a storyteller. I'm always looking for stories. And somehow the process of collecting a signed book always has a story. And I feel very connected to the book. So, all collectors have specific areas of expertise. My area is that I collect author signed books. Of course, I started with history and then kind of broadened my interest. But that is how I actually became a book collector. So today I have probably 3,000 books, all authors signed. But obviously I've got very rare ones like signed by Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and some of the very, very rare ones. Of course, I didn't meet them or collect them in person, but slowly I started collecting by trading and talking to dealers and getting the rare ones because there's always a story there. And I can write a column. For me, honestly, sometimes I buy a rare book so that I can write a story and write my column.
Yeah, that I think we've been talking long enough, and it's a very happy occasion, it's a very happy place. I'd like, if any of you have any questions to ask of Feroz, this is the time.
Please, I can just stand up and tell.
So I'm a big believer in the words that a picture can speak 1,000 words. and possibly because of that, I have a fondness for illustrated books. Possibly, Past and Curious is one of the books about Bangalore which I have loved the illustrations. My question is a very simple one. In your book, maybe if there are two illustrations which have spoken to you the most, which would that be?
Thank
Is there
you.
something like that?
Thank you so much for asking that question. So I'll kind of quickly tell you why this is. So when I decided to write or publish this book, I've probably written, not like Suresh Menon said, I've probably written 200, 250 columns so far, because I used to write for Indian Express. Before that I wrote for Mint, and for Swaraj. Before that, Sir has probably written 25,000 columns.
On the other hand, I never let that.
So when I was planning to republish this, because I really felt that there should be a good quality, high quality produced book on books. It's not just a collection of essays, but it should be beautiful, it should be gorgeous, it should be a collector's delight. It has to look good, it has to feel good, it has to have a social message. I wanted all of them. So I was extremely becoming very greedy with the book. And I'm like, what's the point of reprinting my books, columns which anyway has been which already been there. So I said, instead of recycling my books, I want to upcycle my books. And upcycling is basically taking something that's already been done and increasing its value, right? That's upcycling. So I said, how do I upcycle it? I said, maybe I'll bring artwork to it. What if I ask some artists to do artwork for every essay? And I'd written my previous book, The Invisible Majority, and I'd visited Sense Kaleidoscope, which is this school run for children on the autism, or children or adults on the autism spectrum. And I was blown away by the artwork. And I'm like, this is incredibly gorgeous. And these artists have done shows in Paris and across the world. So they're not amateur, they're damn good. And I was like, okay, what about if I ask those artists to do an artistic representation of every essay? What do they see these essays as? How do they think? Because the people on the spectrum see the world differently, right? I said, so they will draw it very differently. And so I went to Anima Nair and Akshay Shetty, who are the co-founders, and I said, here is a project. I'll give you 100 columns. Tell me how much time you will take. I don't know how many artists you want. So he said, okay, I'll give you 5 artists. Each will do, say, around 20 essays. And then you can integrate the art with your essay. And I'm like, wow, that would make a lot of sense. So they started, and there's an interesting process, because how does this actually work? So I wanted to document it. So there's a camera crew here who documented the entire process. How does these artists on the autism spectrum draw out my essay? So I'm just kind of telling you how it works. So these 5 artists on the spectrum are sitting, and maybe they're reading it out. Angie, who is here, she actually does the first draft of what it could be. So if it's the Golden Book of Tagore, and she'll say, okay, this is what Tagore looks like. And all the 5 artists of very different styles, they will make an actual artwork. It's done with kind of pen and pencil, right? And so they take that, and we have kept all the original artworks, so just so that as a proof that this is what they've actually done. And then we pick the one that represents the essay the closest. Then we convert it into a digital form and color it, and that's how it all comes together. I mean, there are 2 artworks which has blown my mind. The first is, I wrote a column about women and books, women and writing, and it was very interesting that I have a shelf of books, and one day I realized that, oh shit, I have a bias which is unintended, and I found that 90% of the books that I own were written by male authors. And I said, that was an unintended bias that I had, even though women write more and read more. Why is it that I didn't see that bias, that I was reading mostly women authors? It may be because I read mostly non-fiction, and a lot of non-fiction is written by male authors and so on. But anyway, so I spent a whole year, I said, I'm going to read only women authors, nothing else. 1 year of only reading women authors. So I removed all the books, and I said, I surrounded myself with authors who are women. And the artwork, and Angie, correct me, I don't know, who did that? Tanush was gorgeous, absolutely stunning, right? And so that was one of my favorites. And the second one is actually, it's not in the book, but we did a Gandhi Tagore Association. It was there for the Art for Inclusion gallery. Mind blowing. Mind blowing. And that's what I say, I take great pride in saying that the artwork is far better than the essays I've written. And that was the purpose. It was meant to upcycle it. That was the original purpose, that make my essays look far better. It's a different thing that nobody's reading my essay anymore, they're just kind of looking at the artwork. But I don't care, mission is accomplished. So thank you for that question. Nidhi, you have a question there? Yes. You can kind of shout, yeah.
So I'm actually really enjoying this conversation because I happen to be reading both Firoz's book and Sir your book right now. And both as beautifully portray what book lovers feel. So Firoz's book is like this very feel good, here are the West End books. And it's like the specky thing on your bookshelf. While your book is amazing in the courage it takes to criticize, to bring out how you appreciated something or some readers appreciate it, but this doesn't work for me. I think a common underlying message is that you both love books. But what were your reactions when you were reading each other's books with absolutely different approach to what you've written?
Yeah. So see, you are asking a fan, So there's so I am his fan, not the other way around. So I have a very different reaction, and I think my Harsha Bhogle was a very dear friend of mine. He said something very beautiful once, as a life advice. He said, never marry your fan.
Thank God. Thank you, Firoz.
Not a good idea, right? But as I said, I grew up reading Suresh Menon sir's columns because I was a cricket fan, and if you're a cricket fan, you would read Suresh Menon. Very simple. So I had my fanboy moment multiple times because when Pataudi's book was launched, I launched it and coincidentally both the books we launched when I was MD in Labs Gurgaon. And I don't know how, but for some reason, both the protagonists, in the first case Sharmila Tagore ji, who was alive, who's still alive after, because it was written on Pataudi, she was the chief guest. So it was a fan moment for me to meet Sharmila ji, big thanks to Suresh sir. And the other thing was the release of Bedi's biography. And it was fascinating because I had set up this massive event with Bishan Singh Bedi, and we are all sitting there, and I'm like, and he told me one thing. He said, Firoz, I cannot guarantee you that Bedi will show up. And I'm like, what the hell? I mean, this is his book launch. He said, I cannot guarantee, that's Bedi for you. Even if he shows up, you don't know which Bedi is actually showing up because there are different versions of Bishan Singh Bedi, right? And it was fascinating to do both his book launches on cricketers at SAP when I was the MD there. So, as I said, I'm a fan of Suresh Menon. I've grown up reading his books. I think his book is just one of the classics about books on books. I mean, I referred, it's like a textbook for me. I mean, this is compared to him, this is BS. I mean, it's like, okay. This is okay, but,
Thank you, Firoz. That's very kind of you. What did I think? It took me a long time to open this book, honestly. What I liked was that you're talking about, Firoz takes a subject, let's say philosophy, or let's say women writers, or whatever. You can toss an idea in the air, and Firoz sort of grabs hold of it and says, okay, if this is what you're looking for, these are the books that you must read. And I think it's in that sense it's a textbook. I think it's a wonderful book for youngsters because you have to these are the must reads in these various fields. And it's a wide range. It's a wide range. You're talking about cricket, you're talking about football. Well, maybe that's the bottom end of the scale, I don't know. And on the one hand, we're talking philosophy, we're talking science, we're talking maths, we're talking biographies of political figures, we're talking about a whole range. And it's very difficult to pack such a range into one single publication. And that's the strength of the book, in that these are samplers. You read Firoz's book, and then you go ahead and read more deeply with greater sensitivity or with greater interest in something that interests you specifically. And I think that's really the joy of this book, which I've enjoyed thoroughly. And I will keep going back to it because there are some books I haven't read which I need to mark and pick up.
You briefly touched upon childhood, and I was very curious to know, so the books that we read in childhood, we still read.
Yeah.
So for example, Little Prince, or I don't know, there was this really cute book I read when I was young called Getting Lost on Elephanta Caves. And I don't know who the writer was, but I can still, recall it line by line, even though I read it when I was 6 or 7. What about you? Is there a book that has stayed with you from childhood to today that has shaped the way you think for both of you?
It's a tough one. Yeah.
It's a tough one, yes. But the books I read in childhood, depending on the age group, are more or less the books I read as I was growing. I mean, I was a big fan of, which I am not now, but I was a big fan of science fiction those days. And I used to, Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. I think H.G. Wells' Time Machine is probably the first book I can consciously remember reading. And I came across a copy recently and I flipped through it and I loved it and I enjoyed it just as much as I had enjoyed it then. I think what happens is it's not just the book, it's also the connections, it's also the associations that book sort of throws up in your mind. I mean, I can read, for example, Agatha Christie's or Perry Mason's and stuff, which I read when I was very young, when I was in my maybe 13 or 14. And I can read that, I can read those books and I can recall who I thought or where I thought the story would go when I was that age. And I think it's a truly wonderful thing. It doesn't so much take you back to childhood as bring your childhood back to your adulthood.
So for me, I grew up on a lot of Hardy Boys, right? So that was the one that was available in the school library, and so. But I don't necessarily go back to any specific one. The one book that has been transformational is actually what I read in college, which was gifted to me by Dipali, was The Class by Eric Segal. And and the reason it's been very close to me is that when I was in college, I told Dipali, and I don't know whether I was trying to impress her or it would have been that only, that I said, you know what, 25 years from now, I will actually write a book about our classmates, like in the class, who I'm pretty sure after 25 years will become so famous, and I'll be such a loser that the only thing I could do is write about my famous friends, right? And I told that her in college, and guess what? We finished the 25th year last year, and all my classmates met at NIT Warangal. Obviously, me and Dipali are classmates. We sat in the same class, and unfortunately, both of us cannot travel because of my son, so one of us has to be a caregiver. She went to the reunion, and I was like feeling missing out. But guess what happened? There was a project to write the college reunion book, and nobody picked it up because nobody is a writer. And I said, and we released the book yesterday.
Do you think, this is a question to you,
Yeah.
do you think kindness and compassion attracts the people who are noble?
Yeah, I mean, at least the book Secrets says the same thing. The energy that you dissipate is what, the law of attraction, right? The reason why I'm sitting...
Because if it doesn't, then we're in the wrong business.
We're in the wrong business. And why am I sitting here? Maybe I was a fan of Suresh Menon, sir, but I also worked hard, and somehow we are here. I mean, I would have never, if somebody had told me that my book will be launched by Suresh Menon, I've said, no, not possible. It's just not possible. And what's the chance? I just called him and said, sir, I'm here, would you do it? He said, absolutely. So intentions can cross physical boundaries. By the way, it's proven. In quantum mechanics, it's actually proven that your thoughts can move physical boundaries. Has it happened to you guys that you think of your mom and she calls you? It happens to everybody, right? Or you think of somebody and calls you, right? How is that eerie? Is that magical? Is it coincidence? Actually, scientists have proved that your thoughts can cross physical boundaries. I think it's my wish that sir would be here that's made it possible, as much as you put in the effort to make it happen.
Yeah, I think it's important, really, because if you don't, as I said earlier, if that isn't true, then what are we all doing here? It doesn't make sense. There was somebody else, sorry, I saw a hand go up and then go down again.
Any more questions?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yes.
please.
I did see a ghost hand.
Yeah.
Okay.
That wasn't me.
That was
There's
me.
real time.
Yeah.
Something that was told in the introduction. How
Yeah.
do you fit in 30 hours to the 21st?
Yeah, maybe I should. There is no secret, honestly. I mean, I'll tell you this. I've been incredibly fortunate to be surrounded by outstanding people around me. And my simple thumb rule is when you're working, work with people who are better than you. And I'll tell you this very upfront. When I was writing The Invisible Majority, I was pretty clear that I wouldn't be able to pull that off book without somebody who's far better writer than me, but I have the context, I have the framework, but I neither have the time nor am I capable of doing the work, deep work that is required. And that's how I got to know C.K. Meena ma'am. And if I had to write that alone on my own, it would have taken 20 years. There's no way I could have done it in 3 years. So 2 is better than 1, right? But I said, we can partner and you can do things that I cannot and I can do things that you cannot. Together it's a great product. So I'm saying I've been surrounded by people who are far better than I am, and that's why people think that I have more time, because the heavy lifting often is done by people who are around me. The second principle, and this is something I haven't shared, but I'll tell this to you, and C.K. Meena will probably agree to that. My first 4 books were co-authored. First 4 books were written with people. This is technically my first solo book. Technically even though I don't think anything in life is solo, right? As I said, the artwork is by artists, the cover is by Upesh. So to think that I have written this book on my own is fooling yourself. That's never true. And the publishing industry is very interesting. Most of the people who write books together either write a bad book or they end up splitting later on. Right? That's a common, because many of my friends have co-authored books and they are like, it's a nightmare, because everybody is like, which part will you write and which part will I write, and whose name should come first and whose name should come second, and where should the money be split. So I'm very clear on the way we start. And you can ask C.K. Meena ma'am. I said, my name will always be the last in the book. Because the whole industry works on whose name is first, because the first person's name is supposed to be the main writer. I said it doesn't matter. So if you look gifted, it's Sudha Menon and V.R. Feroz. It's not V.R. Feroz and Sudha Menon. If it is looked at grit, we said it's the main protagonist who should be there, and me and Sri Ram will be somewhere. If you look at Invisible Majority, it's C.K. Meena and Feroz. So I get that out of the way very quickly. And I said, there are some things I can do, there are some things you can do. C.K. Meena ma'am's hair has grown white writing columns for the last 50 years. Am I stupid to be the writer of that? No, but she cannot. But I said, I'll give you the sauce. I'll give you the complete framework. I've done disability work for 12 years. I know this damn shit now, okay? I will do the framework. I'll tell you the chapters. I'll tell you the 100 people that you need to speak to. I'll tell you how it should be done. But you are the damn good writer. You write. Because I also don't have the time for this, and I'm not half as good as you are. Keep your ego aside. And I said, I'll not make a single penny out of this, but you can't go hungry. Okay? Because the first condition I say is, this is my 5th book, I've not made a single rupee from any of the book. Every penny has gone for people with disabilities. Every penny. But I cannot say that she has to spend 3 years and not get paid for it, because writers need to be paid. I said, I will pay you for your work, but we are not going to take any royalties for us. I'm basically forcing her to say that you don't get money for 3 years of work. That's not fair too. Why should she be passionate about disability just because I am? So I make it very clear. The rules of engagement are very clear. And you know what? All my authors have literally become the love of my life. So I keep saying I have many girlfriends that across age groups. She's the oldest one, by the way. It was like, sorry ma'am, I was just joking. But we became good friends because we kept our egos aside. We gave each other space. We are not elbowing each other. We are not trying to get credit. We are doing this because it needs to be done. Right? This is not because I want to become a best-selling author. Not required. It will happen on its own terms. So writing books together is incredibly hard. But I figured out that if you can get these things out of the way, then you can write a beautiful piece of book for the community, for whoever is the reader is. You're not elbowing each other. Here it was very clear that I will never interfere in the artwork. Angie, she worked for 2 years with the artist. She said, Firoz, I will send you all the artwork. I said, I trust you. I don't think I've rejected a single piece of art. I didn't say, oh, this is not good, that is not good. I said, I trust you. You're damn good at it. I can sometimes tell a little idea here and there that maybe you should change this way to that way, but I trust you. Now, the thing that is beautifully said is trust produces speed. That's why I'm able to do so much, because I trust people inherently. I give them the freedom, that produces speed. Trust produces speed. If you trust, sometimes you'll go wrong, but that's life, that's okay. That's fine, I don't care. Trust produces speed. People ask me, how the hell do you release a book every year? Every November I've released a book and I'm going to release it for the next 5 years too. How the hell do you do it so quickly? Because I partner with people who are better than me and I give them the space to do that. I'm an ideas guy. I have like 10 books in my mind, but I can't do it if I have to do it alone. So get people with you. That's the only way you will get more time. Otherwise, Gandhi had 24 hours, Nehru had 25 hours, Hitler had 24 hours, I also have 24 hours. This is the same for everybody. But if you get people with you, you can achieve so much more. There's a beautiful saying by Paulo Coelho, and probably leave with that thought. He said something incredibly profound. He said, you can go a long way if you forget who got the credit. Right? Don't worry. And the other thing he said, maybe I'm kind of paraphrasing it. He said, do good, but don't waste your time trying to prove it. Do good, but don't waste your time trying to prove it. Don't worry, just do your damn shit and keep moving. Okay? People will figure it out.
Thank you, Firoz, for all that damn shit. And thank you all for being here. Good night. And the goodbye. The author will sign books. Oh, sorry, he's going to sing a song.
Few things. Firstly, somebody likes books. It was a wonderful conversation. If you can agree on that, round of applause. Right? It's been time to speak. I'm doing like a small token.
Thank you.
I'm doing Suresh as well.
Thank you. I'm sure he's given me one more book.
Thank you very much.
I hope it's not the book that I gave it to you. And
Thank you.
Presentation copy too.
DHI?
See you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.